up guys? Welcome back to the channel. So we got a little bit of a shop video for you guys here today. We're wrenching on the Talon, the total Talon, also known as Nightmare, whatever you guys want to call it. So if you guys have been following along from the beginning, you know that this rig was bought at auction at Copart. We got a whole video on it. It was wrecked. We rebuilt the front frame. All that stuff is holding up great for anybody who is curious. However, the issues we've been having are with the rear axles. And honestly, so when this thing was wrecked, it had a bent, I think it's called the fourth link. It's this upper link here that runs up above the trailing arm. And that was bent pretty severely here. So we bent it back in the beginning of the videos. And I had plans to put a plate across this area to kind of gusset the area that was broke. However, we took it on its first trip, didn't have that gusset in, and then it bent back more, and I think it kept bending a little bit more and more as you kind of rode the thing hard. I mean, you guys see how it gets ridden. So we're not really sure. So in return to that, this tire would kind of toe in pretty aggressively, and maybe that's why I was breaking axles. I'd have to think about it, but I think every axle that this is broken was on that side. So maybe it's not the axle. Also in the beginning at Black Mountain, when we broke 2 axles, I didn't have limit straps on the rear, which we've now got limit straps on here. The sway bar is off. So if you had a sway bar, you wouldn't have this issue, but we don't really like to run sway bars. For all the slower rock crawling and stuff we do, these things ride great. And the normal trail riding, they ride great without a sway bar, especially something like the Talon. I feel like everybody complains about how they ride, but when you take the sway bar off, they ride pretty dang good, in my opinion. Comparatively, you know. Basically, bottom line is the sway bar makes a huge difference. But just a disclaimer, if you do fast trails, taking the sway bar off does hurt your maneuverability or agility, like how agile the machine is without like getting body roll. But once you get used to it, you kind of just learn to drive around it. Unless that's all you do, then just leave it on. But anyways, that being said, we're not really sure if that's what was binding up those axles, causing it to break. But bottom line is, the other night, me and Billy were wrenching on this thing. Probably should have grabbed the camera and made a shot video, but it was late. It was like 10 p.m. and we were just thrashing this thing back together. But so we went ahead and bought a set of OEM axles off eBay, which we threw those in there. We were running Rhino 2.0s at the Badlands meetup ride, and you can see the result of that right here. Gnarly. But like I said, I don't know if that's the axle's fault or if it was that bent arm's fault. It's tough to say, but basically everything I've read and what we've kind of seen is that the OEM axles are the way to go. So now I'm just kind of hoping that either A, it was that bent arm, or B, it was because no limit straps, and maybe the OEMs will be pretty good. So they put up a damn good fight at Black Mountain, I'll give it that. So I'm excited to see what it'll do with limit straps. We put a new arm on there. It was actually a used arm from Aaron Early, so shout out to you. And spray painted that bad boy and threw that on too. So got straight suspension, used OEM axles, and we're gonna see if that fixed our rear axle issue. Obviously they could still break, anything breaks, you know, but we'll see. All right, so the next thing I wanted to bring you guys into the loop on was the I-4 drive system. So if you've been watching the last couple videos, you've heard us say that the I-4 drive is not functioning properly. So we're trying to fix that now. We started to take a look at it the other night with Billy, and we got a couple codes. One was for the actual I-4 drive, like modulator, I guess you'd call it. I forget like the actual specific name, but I'll show you the part in a minute here. And the other one was for a wheel speed sensor. So to do that, we had to, there's a little connector here. It actually plugs in to this guy here. And you unplug it and you jumper across some pins. We found the pins online, and you do a certain cycle code with the key and blah, 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 and hit the brake, and then it flashes so many I-4 drive symbols. Some elaborate system to tell you which codes it was throwing for the I-4 drive. So that led us over to the I-4 drive modulator, which one more thing I want to add is when we bought this rig, it was wrecked in the front end, had some smashed stuff up here. The front diff was actually broke, I believe, like in half. Like the whole case was messed up. There was a bunch of sensors that was messed up. So I bought a brand new front diff OEM, and it came with all new sensors and everything. So that's why we were like, man, it shouldn't be a sensor because we got all new ones. So in regards to the wheel speed sensor, we don't think that has anything to do with what the issue is. But what we do think is this box here where all the brake lines run to, that is kind of what controls. I mean, you got me if you think that I know how this four-wheel drive system works, but I do know that it uses the brakes to slow down another wheel, to apply more torque to the other front tire. I don't know, some elaborate system, but we want to try it in its factory form. That's for sure, because the beating that this thing is taking, it's like, if you just floor it, you could go a lot of places if you had a little bit better four-wheel drive than what we're dealing with. So we're not sure if fixing the I-4 drive is going to help or hurt us, because right now, the way it's functioning is it's basically like just not there. So we basically have a full-blown open front diff, but it doesn't cut any kind of power to the engine. So like, it's not hitting any brakes, kind of loading up the motor and losing power that you don't have that much of to begin with. So it's like, we're curious to see if it's gonna help or hurt us. Hopefully help. Hopefully it'll just be a straight up thrash rig with I-4 drive, not brake. That'd be sick. That's the goal. But we'll see. I mean, if it sucks, then we'll have to do a locker. But also, I mean, I know I'm kind of rambling here, but this is stuff that a lot of the Talon guys want to hear, or people are curious how this thing's been doing. My thing, if we go a locker like I originally planned, then I'd have to do gear reduction. And I know there's a lot of people out there that say, yeah, they run 32s, they run 35s, they don't need gear reduction, blah, blah, blah. I guess maybe you just don't have stickies for one, so maybe it's tougher to spin the stickies, but for the riding we're doing, you need stickies. And for two, like maybe it's just not as gnarly of riding as we're doing. And that's not to say that you guys don't ride hard or anything like that. It's just simply like when you pull up to a 3-foot rock and you're trying to climb the front end on it and you floor it because it literally doesn't have the gearing to crawl over that rock. I mean, there's no, you can't hit that with momentum. You'd bash into the rock. So the gearing is great for the average person, but for what we're trying to do, especially if you put a locker in the front diff, because it'd just be that much more load, then you definitely need gear reduction. We're hoping that we don't need gear reduction with just a functioning I-4 drive and we can just thrash this thing. So that is the goal. But anyways, enough rambling aside. We tore this side apart of that module where all the brake lines go. It's got all those little pins. Everything looks good in there. Everything looks pretty reasonable in here. This is where the magic happens, we'll call it. So this slides onto those pins that you've seen there. All the pins go in those holes. And we actually noticed that this is all cracked and broken, which must have been from the accident. And this was the top side. We couldn't really see it in there that great. So let me get this propped up in a light and I'll show you guys. So that's probably really hard to see on camera. I don't think it's really showing. Basically, in this hole, you can see the circuit board inside of there for whatever craziness this thing is controlling. And it's all corroded, it's all rusty, so obviously it's gotten wet. And I think that whole modulator is bad. So we're gonna look to get a new one of those, get that slapped in here, and that should fix our I-4 drive, is the theory. I mean, it's got a new diff, it's got new sensors. It's the only thing it doesn't have was that. So that should fix it for our next trip that this thing is going on. And let me just throw in a little bit of a teaser. It's gonna need 4-wheel drive for where we're bringing it. So stay tuned for those videos. Should be following up these pretty shortly. All right, so the next little project that we got started on was we resurrected this worn Axon 35S off of Tiki. Only the real OGs will know who Tiki is, but for those of you who don't, it was Billy's YXZ, his first rig that we started this channel with. He had that 3,500 pound winch on it. That thing drug Tiki up mountains, through hell and back. I mean, it drug my YXZ. This winch has been through a lot. So he didn't put it on the Turbo S. He put a bigger winch on the Turbo S, but had that sitting around. So we got that fabbed up on here, and we're getting it wired in now. I'll show you that in a minute. But we also got this this purple winch line, synthetic winch rope from Custom Splice. So shout out to those guys. If you guys need any recovery gear, they are the go-to. They've got all different colors of winch lines, different ropes. Stuff is badass, truly. I mean, that's what we use to recover all our rigs, which you guys know we do that often. They got these cool soft shackles. They replace D-rings, and then some bubble ropes. Use this kinetic energy to pull people out. Cool stuff, but gotta wrap up the wiring on that. So it's got a power that we brought up to this bus bar, which is an aftermarket bus bar. The Honda had factory battery cables that were chilling here for, I'd assume, a factory Honda winch solenoid, which obviously we're not running a factory Honda winch. I don't know what they use, but that's just my assumption. So anyways, you take those battery cables, you land them on this bus bar, screw this bus bar into the frame, and then you run your big positive and negative from your winch up to the bus bar, and then you've got just a keyed on here. And this bus bar comes with a little pigtail that plugs into a factory connector that you see here. So it's got keyed power. And then all we got to do now is kind of dress up these cables, make it a little nicer. And we've got to route this harness into the cab and figure out a way to mount this. One thing I will say is the Talon doesn't have very many switch locations. Sometimes I'll look around and pick a spot to throw that in. I know there's one over here by this headlight, but this switch knockout is massive. It's not like your normal sized standard switch, so must be the switch size that Honda uses. So anyways, gonna try and find a spot to mount that winch switch and wrap up some wiring, and then we'll go from there. Alright guys, here it is all wrapped up. Camera died yesterday, so didn't get to do much of a time lapse, but got the winch line spooled in here. Got it all powered up. Got the wires all cleaned up underneath the hood there. And then you guys seen, cut a hole here for the winch switch, or winch controller, whatever you want to call it. I chose this place just because this piece is already broken from the crash that it was in. So I also drilled 2 holes here, threw some stitches in it, some zip tie stitches to put those 2 pieces of plastic back together, and then test it all out, and it works good. So on to the next On to the next issue that I'm gonna address on this thing. Next thing I want to replace and try to fix this I-4 drive is what we talked about already. It's this main brain for the I-4 drive, and all the brake lines run into it. And I showed you guys that this black box was cracked on ours. So we reached out to Powersports Nation. They are they got used ATV and side-by-side parts, basically just like part them out and sell these parts for cheaper than buying them new, etc. Here's a little clip of their site. Comes with a warranty. They got rebuilt engines, rebuilt shop parts. Looks like some cylinder heads, cranks, transmissions. They get truckloads of these things. So pretty cool site if you're looking for some used parts. Oddball parts like this, it works great for that stuff, but you know, it goes anywhere to full-blown engines. You know, I mean, buying a brand new OEM engine is big money, so if ever have a failure like that, it's definitely a good place to check it out. But anyways, we were gonna pull this piece off, just this black controller, and slap it on ours, and then these should plug right into the factory harness on our machine, and then we'll be able to see if that takes care of our four-wheel drive light. Fingers crossed on this one. All right, got this thing all buttoned up here. Just had to plug in the connections and slap that little electrical piece back on, and then put the little cover on there, and it should be good. So on the Talon, there is a little connector under the seat. You got this little flap here, you pull that out. This connector here is usually plugged into this little red guy. Right now it's plugged into this harness, which actually goes to the DynoJet tuner, programmer, whatever you want to call it. But to clear the codes, you unplug this, and then you have the brown with red wire and a green wire, and you put a little jumper across the pins, and you do a sequence where you push the brake, turn the key on, the light turns on, the I-4 drive turns on. Then when the I-4 drive light turns off, you let off the brake. And then when the I-4 drive light turns back on, you push the brake, and then the I-4 drive light turns back off, and you let off the brake, and then you just wait, and it flashes 2 times, and then after it flashes 2 times, it'll clear off, and it'll stay off if you have no present issues. So we tried this originally when we got the machine, right before the Black Mountain trip, because we're like, oh, maybe it had a damaged sensor. The light was never cleared, and that's why we had our issue. But unfortunately that didn't fix it for us, so I just cleared it out. I should have recorded as I did it, but I had to kind of remember the process myself. But anyways, just cleared it out. It's off right now. I started the machine, it stayed off, obviously. I assume it needs to drive and sense wheel speed and make sure everything is computing back to itself before you would know. So I drove it down the road last time, and then that's when it threw the code back on the first time I tried it. So I have not tried it since. I replaced that computer thing. So about to move some stuff around, take this thing for a spin, and we'll see if it's fixed. Alright, so got it out of the shop. As you can see here, none of these lights are on. The I-4 drive light is right there. So we'll take it for a little rip, and we'll see if it comes back on. Hopefully not. Alright, so you guys seen it probably. I-4 drive light came right back on. Super bummer. But we're gonna throw this little jumper in here. By the way, this is what I was talking about when I said a jumper. I just made it out of a piece of stranded wire. Used a couple strands of the wire to make it small enough to fit inside of that little connector I was telling you about. Jumper the brown with red tracer to the green wire, and then I'll show you guys the sequence to see the codes that it's throwing in a second here. Alright, so once you got that jumpered, I'm getting this info from wizardofgunmonkeys.com. So shout out to that site for throwing down a pretty good tech page here on how to troubleshoot the I-4 drive. So it says, turn the ignition switch on. I-4 drive indicator should come on for 2 seconds to indicate the start signal, then goes off for 3 seconds. Then DTC indication of what the codes are, I guess, in layman's terms. And it just, you count the blinks, and then that correlates the code number, which I'll show you guys when we get whatever code we've got. So it'll be a long blink. It could be long blinks or short blinks. And the long blink is 1.3 seconds. It says the short blink is 0.3 seconds. So you should be able to tell the difference. You count the blinks, and then that should give you your code. So we'll see what happens. So it looks like one long blink right there, and then 2 short blinks right after that. So one long blink, 2 short blinks. So then they've got this chart actually on this site that I'm looking at here, and it looks like one long blink, and then you just look over here on the side here, one long blink followed by 2 short blinks. Looks like it'd be 3 different things. It could be front right wheel speed sensor input. All 3 of those basically equate to front right wheel speed sensor. So before we were throwing a code for, I believe we were throwing 8.1, which was I-4 drive control unit abnormally, I-4 drive control unit malfunction. So hopefully we took care of at least one of these codes. Now I'll have to dive into the front right wheel speed sensor issue and go from there. Alright, well, front right in my opinion would be passenger front right. You can see the wheel speed sensor right up there with the green Sharpie on it, or green paint, whatever. Looks fine. I mean, the harness from what I can see looks just fine. So the new diff came with new sensors, so that's what was in it. It was brand new stuff, so I highly doubt this fixed anything, but I pulled the sensor off of the old diff that was broke and slapped it in here, plugged it in. The connector had some mud in it, so maybe it was that. I don't know. It was just a bad connection. We could hope. So I'm gonna go ahead and clear the codes again and take it for a rip. If not, it must be something wiring, I gotta assume, from that connection up towards like the main harness that it's wired into, which would really suck. So maybe we get lucky, maybe it was just some mud in that connection, and maybe that was fixed, and maybe that'll fix it. We'll see. Alright, well, cleared the codes. Go take it out for another spin quick, see if it comes back on. By the way, I don't know if you guys can hear that clanking noise. That started on the Black Mountain trip. I don't know if it's a U-joint in the drive shaft, or if it's possibly the drive shaft hitting the drive shaft loop, which the drive shaft loop was bent from the wreck and stuff, and when the diff got smushed, it like kind of smushed that stuff. We thought we bent it back and clearance did enough, but it's either that or a U-joint in the drive shaft. But we thrashed the hell out of it at the Badlands and Black Mountain, and it never let go. So we're actually waiting on an aftermarket drive shaft for this thing from Aaron early at 2-Track Fab. So hopefully once we get that in, that'll take care of our issues. But for now, let's see if we can get the I-4 drive going. I should also mention that noise, the happens like when you turn or you're at certain speeds. So it's like when the body like rolls left or right. Kind of hard to say, but something strange, that's for sure. But also, we're off to a good start here. No I-4 drive light, and it was on by this point last time when we took it for a test drive. So hopefully it was that sensor. Maybe it was the mud in that connector. I don't know, but we'll drive it around a little bit, and I'll let you guys know if it fixed it or not. This is two-wheel drive, which two-wheel drive through the sensor, through the code the first time. I'll try four-wheel drive on the way back to the house, and we'll see if that does it. Still no lights. That is sick. So hopefully it's good to go now. Pretty hyped on that. We really wanted to take this thing on a trip with a working I-4 drive so we could really see what the Talon's got to offer in stock-ish form. I mean, you guys, if you guys are curious more on this build, on what's actually done to it, what's aftermarket, what's not, just go back to this past winter, and there's a whole build series on this thing. But it's pretty stock. I mean, stock drive shaft, stock axles. It's got SuperATV front A-arms. It's got inclusive manufacturing, rear radius rods, and I mean that's about it. Trinity exhaust, dyno tune. Let's just running through some things quickly, but it's all covered more in depth back in the build series. So I might take a peek at see what that rattling noise is. Maybe I could find and see if drive shaft's hitting or something. But I-4 drive was the #1 priority as far as that went. Alright guys, I'm gonna end it off here. This thing's back. Had to test out, make sure, see if with a little bit of load that something didn't work with four-wheel drive. I don't know. The light didn't come on. It crawled up on this tire, no problem. Which, to be honest, it probably would have done even with the I-3 drive we were calling it as a joke. But we'll see. So hopefully get to bring both these rigs down on our next trip. Both the girls that you guys will see right after this and an outro that they filmed have COVID, so hoping I don't get it. I still don't have it, so it all depends. I mean, we're supposed to leave in a couple days for our trip, so they should be all good. They're on the up and up. As you're gonna see, they're feeling good. But if I get it, that means I'm screwed and I don't get to go on this trip because I don't want to get all the guys sick. But anyways, if I get to go, you guys are gonna see both these rigs getting a throwdown, getting a beat down south. But we are super excited to see how a functioning I-4 drive works. So let's hope it does work. See you next time, guys. What'd you just say? What's wrong with them?
Broken.
Broken? Really? She said they're broken.
Bye bye.
Do you blow a kiss? Mwah. Say. Mwah.
No.
Bye
She
bye.
said no.
Wait, Mia, tell them. Unbelievable.
Be raw.